Can you start by introducing yourself?
Hamadak Yapi, Nick Tilsen, and Mat Yapi. Chantea Washtena by Tuzapalo. My name is Nick Tilsen, and I'm Oglala Lakota.
There's been a lot of push around the clemency and the freedom of Leonard Peltier. A lot of it's been led by NDN Collective and of course, like the various defense committees that have operated in the last, almost going on 5 decades now for our elder Leonard Peltier's freedom. And his parole hearing is coming up. And I was wondering, can you maybe start by talking about that parole hearing in the context of this larger struggle to get him out of prison?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, like there's been, the movement has been fighting for Leonard's freedom for 50 years, ever since the extradition from the illegal extradition from Canada, and so so we stand on the shoulders of people that have come before us. It is sort of built up to this current parole hearing. He's eligible for parole, and so there is a hearing set for June 10th, 2024, and in that parole hearing, we're gonna argue all the different things that we have always argued about Leonard's release, but we're gonna have extra emphasis too on his health. He's really unhealthy at the present time. He's about 80% blind in one eye. And there's some kind of blockage happening where he's periodically going blind in the other eye too, and he's not receiving medical attention. And so we've done a lot of work to create a re-entry plan for him to come back to. He made it really clear he wanted to go back to his homelands in Turtle Mountain, because he's enrolled at the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa. And so we have been working with the tribe up there and making sure that he has services that are available to him when he comes back home. We helped arrange a home for him, so he has a home to come back to. So we've done things to help strengthen his parole application to be able to come home and back to his community and back to his movement. We suspect that there's going to be heavy opposition by the FBI. Both retired FBI Agents Association and other folks who have built this, illegal and false narrative about him to try to keep him in there, because if it was up to them, that he would die in prison. And so this parole hearing, at 79 years old, could be his last parole hearing. And so this is a historic situation, and we're fighting really hard. And I think that the collective of lawyers that have been working on this have provided and built a really good parole packet. And we're making sure that we are able to make the strongest case possible for Leonard to come home back to his people.
And maybe you can talk a little bit about Leonard's kind of position within the parole process, because it's something that isn't common for prisoners now. And I think you said earlier, or I read somewhere, that there's probably just over 100 incarcerated people now who are still like in that parole process, and why that itself has also been an obstacle for his release.
Yeah, the parole commission is in the old parole process is sunsetting, to prior to people who have been incarcerated prior to 1987. And because the real reason why is because there has been so much room for interpretation of the process that they have proven pretty much systematically that prisoners' rights have been violated, pretty much systematically throughout history. So they're eliminating that process. But old, what they called, old inmates, or inmates that are under the old law, still have to follow that process. And so the way it's set up is there's a parole commission. Right now there's 2 people on the parole commission. what happens on the day of a parole hearing is the parole commissioners aren't even there at the hearing. At the hearing, there is a parole officer. We don't know who that parole officer is yet. That parole officer will be announced in the coming weeks as we lead up to the 10th. And what happens is the opposition states their side. The parole officer is allowed to ask questions to that side, and then Leonard's lawyer gets to present our side, essentially, of why he should be paroled, and the parole officer gets to ask questions. And then what happens is the parole officer then prepares a report and a recommendation. A report and a recommendation, and then that goes to the parole commissioners, the parole board, which is only 2 other people. And by statute, they have to make a decision within 30 days of the hearing. So there's a chance, that we had this parole hearing on June 10th, and within 30 days, we'll have an answer. And we'll have an answer, and that answer will be in writing officially from the Parole Commission, who, to be clear, is supposed to be an independent body, who is supposed to be an independent body that is not supposed to be legally to be influenced by the Department of Justice or by the FBI. But historically, that has been the case. And so, we are hoping for the best, planning for the worst. But I can say that this parole packet that has been prepared is the best parole packet that has ever been prepared in the history of Leonard's case. I think it's over 500 pages long, with letters ranging from the Pope to tribes throughout this whole country to senators and Congress people, and a huge outcrying of support for Leonard, including former prosecutors like Reynolds, who say that there's no evidence that Leonard had anything to do with killing those police officers on June 26th. And so these things are important for people for the Parole Commission to take into account, but also equally what's important is that we have a good plan for him to come back. What does that plan look like? Laying out that plan. He wants to go back home. We created a plan for him to go back home. We've been working directly with Leonard to create this plan, because I do think that with proper health care, that Leonard could live for a while. Leonard could live for a while when he gets back out. And when he gets back out, he wants to do things in his community. He wants to do things to support his people and support his community, and especially being able to do good stuff for children and supporting the people right there in in Turtle Mountain.
It sounds like the old law, as you put it, for parolees really affects a lot of the people from that movement era that were targeted by the FBI, and we would consider them political prisoners, even though the United States doesn't admit that it has any political prisoners. So as much as you want to say or want to believe or are told that this is supposed to be an independent process that's not supposed to be affected by outside influence, that we're living in a very politicized and polarized world right now. What is it that the pressure from grassroots communities can do to help make this case, not just legible, but also maybe will it have an effect on other cases? Is this a movement from below, with the grassroots community? Yeah. Because it seems like there's just like a lot of, kind of higher up decision makers that are kind of controlling this process.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because we're like, at the stage of parole, really, it's so hard because that parole commission supposedly is insular. right? So the best things that we could have done is all the support letters. So everybody that did do a support letter, tribal leaders. I mean, we have amazing letters from, Frank Starr comes out from Oglala Sioux tribe where this incident happened, from all the different tribes, from Leonard's tribe up there, up in Turtle Mountain too. All of these different tribes. But I think it comes down to is we do have to make sure that the parole commission, which is these two people, plus the parole officers, the recommender, so it's kind of like a quasi third member in some ways of the parole commission, feels the weight of this, particular decision. And so the things that people can do is people can write letters to the parole commission. It's up to the parole commission whether they read those letters or not. They legally don't have to, but I think it's important. As grassroots organizers, we provide pressure on them. I think letter writing campaigns to the Attorney General, and I think that that on the 10th, there's going to be a World Day of Prayer for Leonard too. So people, the ask is that people are in prayer that day too, because this is also a spiritual battle too. It's going to be a mixture of legal, political, and spiritual battle that helps get him out. But those are the things that people can do right now. I think people can also use their platforms to illuminate of what this was really about, because the FBI is going to once again create a false narrative, right? They have been very invested ever since the shooting of that day, and even before. At that time, they made a decision that they were going to utilize Pine Ridge and that community as the place to take down the American Indian movement and to dismantle the movement and to fractionate the movement, because the movement was making advances. And so they participated in a highly illegal process, from the illegal extradition to, the ballistics don't even show up. I guarantee that on the day of the parole hearing, the FBI is going to come in and literally say the ballistics are consistent, showing that Leonard shot the agents, when in fact, federal prosecutors who prosecuted this case said that the ballistics were wrong. That there's no proof that Leonard shot these agents, that the bullet that killed these agents did not come from Leonard's gun. And so the bullet doesn't fit, the gun doesn't fit, but they're invested into this false narrative. So one of the things that we can continue to do, I think, as organizers and grassroots people, is to illuminate many of the facts of this case, and push hard of what this would mean for Indian country to have Leonard to come back home. Because, this country is supposed to be in a place of racial reckoning. It's supposed to be in a place of looking upon its past. And this is a very dark part of the history of the war an illegal war that the FBI engaged on Indian people, on the American Indian movement. And Leonard is one of the people who played an important role in that movement, and that movement created many advances for Indigenous people that we benefit from to this day, ranging from Native American Freedom of Religion Act to the Self-Determination Act to even the cultural resurgence of our people. But himself has not been able to be beneficiary of that, because he has been isolated and kept from the people, which is always their goal with political prisoners. And so we, whatever news that is out there, Leonard eats it up, and he wants to know people are fighting for him, because it gives him enough strength to get to the next day. And he is at the point now where he is on a day-to-day situation where and he's, on a good day, Leonard's still fired up. I talked to him last week, and he sounded strong, even though he's in lots and lots of pain, tons and tons of pain. He isn't a walker. That's how he gets around. Like these old images of the 1970s and 80s and 90s even that are out there for Leonard, that's not the same Leonard. Leonard's almost 80 years old in a walker. Imagine anybody who's 80-year-old in anybody's life, that you're caring for, and they have access to some kind of medical care. So that's kind of where the situation is at. I think people sending letters to Leonard right now in Coleman, handwritten letters following the protocol, is also really helpful, because that actually gives direct encouragement to Leonard. And those letters that come in, Leonard reads them. Just so you know, like if you want to write a letter to Leonard Peltier, he will read that letter, and it will give him strength. So that's what I would say that I think that people could do. And NDN is releasing a toolkit, I believe, on Tuesday, that lays out these different things that you can do to take action, including on the day of the hearing. The idea is to be in prayer on that day. That's the call to action: is go to a public place, host a prayer. So yeah, those are the things people can do.
Leonard Peltier has maintained his innocence throughout this entire process, and through the terms of his sentence and incarceration. Is there pressure on him by the parole board for an admission of guilt or remorse, or how does Leonard handle this kind of situation? Because I've heard in the past where there are some cases where people, they want to hear an admission of guilt and remorse.
Yeah, I mean quite frankly, it's one of the reasons why the old law, the old parole law is going away, is because there's all these things that you have to do to sit good time, and Leonard's superseded. I mean, when it comes to sitting good time, I think Leonard is probably at 60, between 62 and 65 years. I forgot what the exact number is, but he has lots of good time, because he's been pretty, good while he's been in prison. And so there's always this pressure. Are you remorseful? Do you have remorse for what you did? Are you willing to, apologize for what you did? Are you willing to have remorse for what you did? And Leonard's in prison because he was innocent. And Leonard's gonna stay strong and fight till the bitter end. I mean, I will say this, in talking to Leonard, there's no part of Leonard that wants to back down. Leonard's gonna fight for his freedom and his liberation till the very end. And he's gonna hold his ground. He's gonna hold his ground to that. The closest thing to, apologizing, remorse, those types of things, is stuff that he's already stated. Stuff that he stated in prison writings. He didn't kill those FBI agents on that day. But does he wish that day didn't happen on June 26th, and that Joe Stuntz wasn't killed either, and that the other FBI agents weren't killed either? Yeah, he does wish that. And he has stated that, and so this is the difficult situation that we find ourselves in. And I imagine they're gonna apply pressure. They're gonna bring in the children of the slain officers, our slain agents, but even them need to understand that they got the wrong person, that Leonard's human rights and civil rights were violated in the process of his incarceration. And, we're sorry that your ancestors, your father was killed, on Pine Ridge. But there's a lot of bodies on Pine Ridge. There's 70 plus unresolved murders on Pine Ridge. And, the FBI didn't care to investigate any of those other ones, very few of them. Because they're, indigenous people, Lakota people, traditional people, and so even in the nature of this, of like holding on to this is a part of American history that needs to continue to be told of what actually happened. And the reality is he was illegally extradited. they violated their own laws once again. They and you look at former prosecutors, former FBI, field directors, the whole gamut. And as history goes on, the reason I think people are coming forth more and more is people are realizing they're getting closer to the end of their lives, and they're having a conscience about what they did to our people at that time. And they want to go down in peace. They want to go down, and they know that they use their positions to violate the rights of indigenous people, and Leonard in this case. And, there's many people who are not as high profile as Leonard Peltier, who have been sitting incarcerated since the 1970s. Many of them have died in prison. Many of them shouldn't be there. There's tons of Black, indigenous, and brown people from that era. Some who are well-known activists and some that are not well-known activists that have been incarcerated under the same set of laws, under the same narrative. But I think Leonard's case is a magnification of that time. They use Leonard's case. This is how invested the FBI is. They use Leonard's case as an example of how they get their guy and how they got their guy when they do training at the FBI still to this day. That's how invested they are into making sure that this narrative, continues, and they would like to see him, die in prison. And of course, we would like to see him come home back to his people. So I think that it's going to be a challenging day, and I think that it's going to, nobody's testimony on that day is more important than Leonard's himself. To be able to stand in his power and to, be asked questions and any way that the other witnesses that are there on that day can help strengthen the case for him to come home, then, the witnesses will be prepared to do that.
The parole hearing is one of kind of several legal strategies in the works right now. Can you talk a little bit about, this is an if, and, if, the parole hearing, he gets denied parole, what happens then? And what happens concurrently with the parole hearing?
Yeah, so if Leonard is denied parole, there's a few things. Quite frankly, we've been taking sort of multiple prong approaches to trying to get him out. But if he's denied parole, what we'll do right away is do an appeal. So if he's denied parole, then we'll appeal and start the appeal process. The other thing that we'll do is we'll rev up the clemency machine. We'll be asking for executive clemency. That's when the president of the United States can actually pardon Leonard Peltier, and we'll be refiring that approach back up. And we understand that we're going to be doing that in an election year, but we're committed to fighting for Leonard in multi-pronged strategies. There's a route to also submit an application on Leonard's behalf for a compassionate release. But at this point, we think executive clemency is a stronger position to be putting our resources into in calling for him. Between that and appeal, and then I think that there's international strategies that folks are looking at too, and different approaches from an international standpoint to try to increase awareness at the United Nations and seeing what is legally possible there too.
Yeah. Do you have any sort of final messages? I know you, this will probably be going out the same day or around the time your toolkit gets published on NDN. But, you know, what's the best way for people to keep updated and abreast of the news and, you know, the outcome of the parole hearing?
Yeah, so follow NDN Collective. We're going to be doing a countdown. We're going to be doing a countdown starting. Well, I guess when this comes out, it'll be this week, all the way leading up to it, leading up to the hearing, because we want to make sure that this is not happening in silence. So please, like, follow NDN Collective. Many organizations like Amnesty International, you know, the Ad Hoc Committee for Leonard Peltier Defense Committee, ACLU, many organizations are going to be putting out stuff. It's really important to amplify the story and let people know that this hearing is coming up. You know, continuing to write letters, follow our platform at NDN Collective. We'll keep sharing everything out, you know, follow the hashtag Free Leonard Peltier. And also make sure you vote Chiki and pray for him too as we do this political work. We'll report back about how we thought the parole hearing went. I think that we'll have a live on NDN Collective's platform about how the parole hearing went and who was able to, you know, because it's still up in the air of like who's going to be a witness and who's not going to be a witness, because really the parole commission controls that and the parole officer controls that. And to be clear, we're battling there too. I mean, to be honest, they're trying to limit the number of witnesses that Leonard has, and we're trying to make sure that we get as many witnesses as possible. But it's in their hands too. And so we'll be able to report back at that time. And then we'll make sure that we're able to, you know, put out there what we're doing. Please host a prayer vigil, either during the day or at night on the 10th, to put prayers into there for Leonard's return home. And most importantly, keep teaching the people about the history of Leonard. There's a lot of facts that exist out there and a lot of facts that we have been pushing out there too. Make sure you talk about this to your kitchen table and talk to this about your people that you work with and your Tiwahis and Tioshpais and families, and because this issue, it's been going on for so long, we tend to forget about it. We tend to go on with our lives, and we're trying to really make that happen. And so to bring to light what happened during that time and how we can continue to support Leonard.